It looks like we are on the air again. Welcome to Evolution Hour on the 21st of October as we hear Election Day. Yipes. Pining for the ancient times of analog devices. And don't forget tortucanwordpress.com, where there's a whole bunch of stuff there. Freebie, share the PDFs far and wide. This is all copyright-free material. Run for it, kids. Okie doke. Now then. As you all know, we're continuing to plow through our exciting world of Titans, the dinosaur book from our creationists, and taking pot shots at the stuff they leave out, which is like a lot, as we've noticed that there's kind of a superficial element on these ornithischian dinosaurs, and only one taxa, as it turns out, is representative of the smaller forms of this grouping that's leading off into iguanodontids and, in fact, a few other little groups as well, as we shall be seeing. And that is the Heterodontosaurus. It's no sources whatsoever are offered for, all they got is just a little blurb of information, but they don't cite anybody at all in it. It's a very small critter, crow-sized. And it turns out it's actually the largest of their family. So with the Heterodontosaurs, we're getting into the very tiniest critters that are in that bird range, not small as a hummingbird, but nonetheless small. And Sarfati and Tay mention peripherally that there are smaller ones in this group, presumably in the same kind, manidans and frutidans. But interestingly, they do not mention tuannulong. With its preserved, quote, filamentous integumentary structures, unquote, from a 2009 paper from Zhang, which we'll be putting into the links, which we noted in volume 1 of The Rocks Were There, relating to the whole issue about what's going on in dinosaurs and their integumentary systems that are branching off in diapsids to form feathers, but also bristly things and stuff. And over on the mammal side of things, developing into hair. A lot of the same genetic systems, sonic hedgehog and bone morphological protein and all of that, which has been covered in great detail, cited it in Rocks too. And also I was alluding to it in Evolution Slam Dunk as well. Nothing of that's popping around in the creationist lexicon, but it's even better. So I'll be putting a link up to a 2010 paper from Butler et al. On the body size aspect, and how some of them may have been omnivorous, which Sarfati and Tay kind of are vaguely aware of. The point is about the Heterodontosaurs, they are a very basal group. And various phylogenies have had to try to wrestle with how they fit into things. There's not a lot of them known. They're not an uncommon animal, but there's not a great deal of variety in them, to the point of where it's often difficult to sort out the phylogenies. And, of course, the baraminologists don't dive into them at all. So, whoop, we have no clue. Lest they maybe find that they could be connecting families, which, of course, would be breaching the kind barrier. Anyway, there's a wonderful little paper from 2020, which I'll be putting a linkage up to, from Dieudonné et al., A New Phylogeny of Sauropodon Dinosaurs, which goes into considerable detail in breaking down the chronology and the details of the various bunch. This branch here has Heterodontosaurs very basally. They're farther along than we find with the groups that are going to go up into Psittacosaurus, or the ones with the bristle tails. And Tiannulong is a somewhat more derived form, and branching off from that cluster, we're going off into Pachycephalosaurs and that bunch, the bone-headed ones. Then when we move farther along, they continue along in the analysis, and that's when that grouping that is starting to branch off just before our little Heterodontosaurs in the cladogram are eventually bringing in Iguanodon and that crowd. And, of course, it's just an enormous number of taxa that are known today. Oh, hi, Lisa. An enormous number of taxa that are known today that the creationists are never going to be able to catch up on, which deliciously leads us to a part 2 since we are dealing with the integument issue and what exactly critters can do with their genetics and all the rest, just last May, dear old Ken Ham posted, "Did some feathered dinosaurs have bird-like skin?" Which I'll be putting a link up to. And it was pouncing on a new paper on dinosaur skin evolution by Zhijiao Yang et al., which fortunately is in Nature Communications and therefore is open access. So I'll be putting a link up on that, which is about those very little Psittacosaurids that we're dealing with. I'll read a paragraph from this in their evolutionary implications section. Collectively, these findings suggest that Psittacosaurus retained the plesiomorphic condition of its scaled reptilian ancestors in non-feathered skin regions. It is reasonable to presume that the skin of feathered body regions, i.e. the tail, exhibited some or all of the modifications related to feather support and movement that characterize the skin of extant birds. This presumed variation in skin structure in Psittacosaurus is consistent with spatial partitioning of gene expression, a phenomenon evident during feather development in extant birds due to activation of regional patterning genes. Golly gosh. No. No creationist is willing to accept the idea of feathered dinosaurs. They draw the line on that. In fact, they basically channel Ellen Fiducia, where if it's a dinosaur-like and it's feathered, it must be a flightless bird. And that gets into churning. But the fun part about this thing is that clearly this paper is relating to specific information on the patterning systems in bird genes. And it turns out that's a footnote at the end of this. Footnotes 91 to 93, which relates to a 2015 paper and a 2016 paper and a 2018 paper. Fortunately, all of them open access, so I will be linking to them. And they are going into great detail on all of this stuff. So it makes it terribly hilarious when Ham concludes, and by the way, he discusses absolutely nothing of this stuff. So this new study tells us nothing about the evolution of bird skin. Well, frankly, the bird skin part has been covered in great detail in those various papers that we've been citing in our various books, and about which the creationists avoid, and therefore parasitical ham, way up on the food list, doesn't get. Oh, yes, don't forget to vote. Absolutely. I just filled out my ballot today. Washington State is an all mail-in ballot. So everything is easy peasy. There's no fuss and bother. There's no need to schlep to a voting station and stand in the rain or anything else. We get our things well in advance. I put in all my little filigrees, and there's a website that we can go to find out when our ballot has been processed and all that kind of stuff. It's all absolutely above board, no fuss, no bother. Utah, I think, operates on a similar kind of basis, and then quite a few of these other states have been kind of clumsily columphing along. They should just do the same system that we have here and simplify it. Of course, that means it'll be easier to vote, and that means people that, Oregon is in that mode. Yeah, that's great. It's straightforward. So I have my ballot all filled out, and theoretically, I could just drop it in the mailbox, but I don't have to worry about that. We have drop boxes all over the place, lots and lots of them all over town. It's not like some of these states where conveniently the Republicans try to make sure that there are very few drop boxes available in places where Democrats might be voting. Suspicious, eh? Anyway, mine is up at the local library, which is just up in the adjacent park, and so I can go schlepping up there, get a little exercise. I often do that late at night when I'm dropping letters off at the mailbox, which is on the other end, going down the street in the other direction. I live in a nice, convenient little location for all that kind of stuff. At any rate, my motto is quite straightforward. Since we've got several people in Washington that have R's next to their name and are not necessarily full of Trumpistas. Unfortunately, they also are not being asked about a lot of this stuff. Some of them are kind of ideologue, Trumpista enablers. The guy running for governor is in that mode, and they suddenly are becoming all okay with upholding the law, even though they were voting to overturn the ACA and defund Planned Parenthood and all of that up the yin yang. I can't vote against Trump. I'm not a U.S. citizen, but hi, all nice to catch you live. Yeah. I'll be following in great detail. I'm cautiously optimistic. The polls are just absolutely neck and neck, but we'll find out whether or not those polls are all that accurate. There's a bunch of different dynamics. If you look at just the enthusiasm level and the degree to which people are, there's like 40 million Gen X that are coming on, Gen Z people that are coming on, potentially voters this time around, and that can completely upset the apple cart. It'll be intriguing to see whether or not South Carolina is in play to go for Harris, and whether or not Florida does. And then there's also quite a few Senate seats that we want to watch. Ted Cruz looks like he might be in trouble finally, and cross fingers he can be voted out. Josh Hawley, a little sprinting twit from January 6th, looks like he's in kind of trouble. So we'll be watching very closely. The other thing that intrigues me is what the total vote count will be. Trump got 75 million. In 2020, 10 million more than he got in 2016. But if you look at the number of disaffected Republican voters that are 15 to 20% or so, how many of them will end up not voting? Or vote, some of them even holding their nose and voting for Harris, or follow more overtly, the Liz Cheney route and vote for that. In which case, if it's a system where Trump only manages 65 million votes this time and Harris pulls in 90 million plus, that's going to be very interesting. Plus, we have to see how it fits up on the the senator from Florida too. Yes, yeah. There's a lot of interesting little campaigns around there. And so anyway, my general principle is absolutely I'm voting against anybody who has any connections to that culture camp extremist Trumpista network. We have some at varying positions for some of the lower spots that actually do link up to some of these little wackaloon ones. The ones that made it through the grist for the major political offices are somewhat more circumspect. But we know from the record that Kathy McMorris Rodgers had that she was a full-out Trump enabler, and it was like nailing Jello to a wall to get her to discuss any of these things. And the fellow running, the Republican running to replace her, looks like to be just the same kind of fog bank. He has a bit of a track record on that front. So anyway, I'm to the point of where, well, all the way down. And then the only quirky ones that have to be worked on, and I've located them, is the nonpartisan positions for judges to make sure that not some nutball is not being voted on in here. Yes, Mitch the Turtle. He's in that lower region of hell, in my view, along with Lindsey Graham and Kevin McCarthy and these others who, after January 6th, should have expelled Trump from the Republican Party as a traitor. And the fact that they didn't do that, they didn't marshal things, and eventually we're going down and kissing the ring and doing all the enablement things, and McConnell is going to vote for Trump again this time, shows that they are absolutely useless from an ethical or moral standard. Anyway, so there's the election bit. Everybody, remember, anybody that's way younger than me, I was just pondering here that there are people who are in school today who could easily live to see the 22nd century. And that world that they're going to have to live in is being made by what we decide now and who we elect now and the policies that are made now. And I can assure you that the Project 2025 Republican vision of things, the Federalist Society, the Heritage Foundation, their brains are stuck in 1975. And in many cases, their ideology is more 1675. They are just completely out of tune. Or as I point out, they're not aloha, they're not Trek. And relating to aloha, the Hawaiian idea of hospitality and decency of character and kindness, and Star Trek, the world of Gene Roddenberry. Quite a few of I think it'd be very hard pressed to find too many people in the Star Trek universe, and the people producing it and directing and acting in it, who are not for Harris, because it's that worldview is not a one that connects up with that wackaloon, dictatorial, scientifically illiterate ignoramus stuff. I'm particularly incensed at seeing Governor Sununu was just on this week. where he was like nailing Jello to a wall, following the party line, going on about how Trump was so much better for the economy. No, he wasn't. The best that can be said about Donald Trump is he didn't immediately tank the Obama administration. And some of the things already were kind of squiggling, despite all the drill, baby, drill mantras. Gas prices actually were rising in the middle of the Trump administration. And then, of course, tanked when people stopped driving because of the pandemic. And so nobody should be listening to any blather from Donald Trump, convicted business fraud, and somebody who managed to bankrupt a gambling casino. He has no credibility on that front. Even Wall Street Journal and Nobel laureates and all that are practically lining up to point out, nah, this guy's economic policies are really crappy. And yet you've got his enablers living in a fantasy bubble meanwhile, Trump is off doing a little teeny stunt at a McDonald's, which reminded me of the experience we had with the Supreme Court, which basically that was Donald Trump riding through the Federalist Society, pack the court drive-through and being asked, would you like a side of fries with that, Kavanaugh? That's kind of the level the Trump administration runs on. But anyway, back to our little pals, the dinosaur bunch. So those regional patterning genes that relate to skin formation and feather formation are worked out in remarkable great detail in those various papers that I'll be putting the links up to. And I'm also going to toss in some meringue from another paper from 2023, Terrell, which reviews function and evolution of bird feathers. So it's not at all that the scientists, just haven't had worked out any of this. Poor little Ken Ham, I think, very probably has no clue about what this material is. MTG is on the way to getting sued. Yeah, that relates to her blither blather on Dominion. Apparently not remembering, of course, it's possible she does have the attention span of toast. Apparently not remembering the reason why Tucker Carlson isn't on Fox Trump Pravda is because he was blathering on about the Dominion supposedly doing fraud, and Dominion sued. And Fox settled out of court and shelled out $787 million, $750 million they had to funnel out because of that. And there are quite a few other lawsuits pending, not only from Dominion, but some of these other vote machine companies that have been libeled by the various election-denying nutballs. So MTG, I'm not sure what the legal circumstance of where somebody who was a sitting person in Congress, whether they can be sued while in office, but we'll see what goes on. Nevertheless, Dominion is perfectly happy to, so I think they've got a lawsuit still pending with dear old Rudy Giuliani, ex-lawyer. Anyway, hi, Justin. My gosh, it's been a long time. Yes, I haven't changed at all. I'm still a desiccated old man. Yes, there we go. Yes. Justin is a dear old friend from Spokane. Has had occasional, health issues up and down, and it's nice to know you're still kicking around. Hope you're doing well. It's an exciting world that you're living in. Yes, bone morphological protein. That we review for volume 2. We're also bringing up a lot of these little bits because those are playing a part in the whole issue of the development of multicellularity and which gene systems are kicking in which in formation, and the issue about what the heck was going on with the Ediacara biota. And there's an awful lot of really exciting work on here, which has been virtually ignored by, basically Gunter Beckley at the Discovery Institute. He tiptoes around some of this stuff in just some vomitously long posts on the various Cambrian and Precambrian organisms, where he's just trying to deny relationships and evolutionary implications and systematic issues. And it's Jackson and I are having a fun time pulling all of this together. And I will be going out next month to Jackson's wedding. I will finally be able to see in person my co-author. We missed each other years ago when I was going down on a trip to see my sister in Louisiana, where he is up in Shreveport, where my sister's out in Alexandria. And unfortunately, at the time I was going down for that trip, he was visiting relatives in the Carolinas. So we missed each other on that, and it's all been done by email and Zoom ever since. But anyway, yes, indeed. We got our cute little network of people. Another network I'm delighted in, and the secrets of what goes on in Twitter on the sidelines. We have a Science Friends network that's got Dapper Dino and Erica Gutsick-Gibbon and Zach Hancock and Joel Duff and a whole slew of people. Dan Stern Cardinale, just a pile of folk. And we shop talk and exchange material and bring up the latest technical papers or the latest example of some creationists shooting their foot off. So we can share back and forth to speed up our process of information exchange. And I relish the material that goes on in there, that because it's quite impossible for anybody to keep track of the thousands of journals out there. And so people who have a disciplinary focus can deal with that. I try to hit PNAS Science and Nature every week. Then all the other material that comes along, I'm just researching stuff on the source field on homochirality issues with a new creationist paper that pops up at via a CMI link, and I've been looking up the source material on that stuff and that to keep track of it. Because remember, one of the big projects that I do, and thank you very much for all the people that can help keep the little project going. I'll be putting up my thank you note for our patrons, is that I'm measuring source by source the whole field of technical literature that creationists draw on. And that gives us a measurement of how much they're paying attention to and how much they're ignoring. We'll be kind of... Oh, yeah. Gutsick-Gibbon is absolutely fantastic. I think, whereas I am an annoying old fart, Gutsick, Erica, is absolutely stunning as articulate, knowledgeable, and gracious. And she can just practically pistol whip somebody verbally while doing so with such a pleasantry about it that who can take offense at her? I mean, I think even Standing for Truth has to kind of acknowledge that she's very personable and just fabulously articulate. Somebody else, I was just watching a video that Milo Rossi did with Flint Dibble on discussing pseudo-archaeology and stuff. They had like a monster 3.5-hour chat with some people online that went into all that. Rossi is just a live wire. He's hyper as all get out, but absolutely meticulous. And he embodies that whole source methods approach, which is you let the chips fall where they may and you get all your facts straight. And Flint Dibble's in that same little mode. And there's so many different people out in so many different technical areas that are embodying this. Everyone, I think it's because it's not presented as such. The people that practice what I would call source methods kind of come up with them on their own. And they make that source analysis and following up the primary source literature. They realize that's the one sure avenue to being rigorous, is to do it at that level. And because they're so often putting up the links and things so everybody that can follow along, that's what I try to do here. And everybody that does videos I would recommend doing the same thing. That it's not good enough to sit up there as a pundit. You want other people to follow the information and you want them to follow up on their own. And if luck would have it, I hope people will dive into the stuff and go way farther than I have and surpass it. Yes, greetings, sentient beings. So there's just an awful lot of material. And of course, everybody knows that follows the channel that every other week, next week will be the next installment. I'm plowing down through that stupid Luskin 800 thing to check and see exactly what all the material is and get it all plugged into the system so I can deal with that part as well. As I've been finding, and as anybody that reads the original literature can find, it's still not helping the case that the intelligent designers and Luskin were dealing with, to think that 50%-ish or more of junk DNA is actually functional? No. There's been nothing in that to undermine Dan Stern-Cardinale's measurements as to the small percentage, which, because there's so many retrotransposons and all that, it adds up to an awful lot of examples, but it's still a tiny proportion of the whole. Yeah, they at least 99% of people regarding it aren't into it. Yeah, it's, and we've seen now with the rise of Trumpism that there's a peril to be paid for that. What drives me nuts watching the news coverage of the Trump-Harris campaign is they just don't know how to do source questions. It's just not a thing. It doesn't matter whether you're on liberal or conservative media. This is a thing they just don't do. And that needs to change. Fact checking gets done. That's fine and dandy. But you have to move beyond fact checking. When Speaker Johnson is asked about Trump denying the 2020 election, and Vance will do exactly the same tap dance. They says, well, we have concerns. We had concerns in 2020 about the election. What concerns? Based on what? What source material? The episode that I discussed earlier where Vance and the stupid Haitians as an exemplar of incompetent method. It's perfectly natural for creationists to indulge in that kind of approach where you have a rumor that you latch on to, and then for political purposes, you decide to exploit it. And then Donald Trump comes along and repeats Vance's claptrap. Well, I saw it on video. Thank Gramps. You saw it on the TV. That's very, very fine. But was it true? And to quiz people about what sources they draw on, if any, and do they know about fact checking any of it? And to what extent have they paid the slightest attention to information outside their narrow data field? We have no clue about half of these people as to, or most of them, as to what source material they're going on. Vance, when he, after his debate with Walz, promised to put up sources for the immigrants causing a problem for housing prices claim. And he did put up 3 sources, not one of which actually was supporting the main claim. It was all very generic, and one of them dated all the way back to the Trump administration. Vance was cagier. He basically is saying that he just riffed off of it, and he brings it up in order to bring attention to the serious threat that supposedly exists about the immigration issue. And so functionally, he's saying it's perfectly fine to lie about a thing, never mind what the consequences are for the people that the lie hits, so long as we bring up the issue that we're misrepresenting at this higher level. Bad methods all the way around. And the vacuity, the bleary-eyed directness and boldness of Vance. And there's every reason to think that Vance would either end up becoming president himself through the Trump administration, or Trump resigning or being pulled out because his health was deteriorating and his brain was turning into mush, and they would invoke the 25th Amendment. Peter Thiel and the various money bags that are behind Vance could very easily deal with that. Housing costs is yes, equity buying. Yes, the housing issue is a problem. This is another thing that just drives me up the wall about the matters, is that the housing problem has not materialized overnight. This has been a long-standing problem, and it involves speculation, bank control of things, as well as the interest rates that are set, housing and zoning, the rules about expanding into areas without consideration for environmental circumstances, as people now in Florida are discovering, as they've built and people have come to the Sun Belt and enjoy themselves until the hurricanes keep coming and coming and coming, and their insurance rates are absolutely through the roof. And so it's going to become the case that an awful lot of these places become functionally unaffordable because nobody can afford to buy the insurance. And so rich people, of course, the people that will be benefiting most from a second Trump administration, will have no problem with their insurance, and they will be maintaining their private plane and their gated community and their private helicopter, and they'll eventually be buying little private hippity hop Uber helicopters, short haul material as we move farther into the 21st century. But regular people, we're going to have to deal with the circumstance. So anyway, yes, this is I have a proposal that I would favor, and you'd need a progressive Congress to pull this little trick off. Or you can do it at state levels as an experiment to get people going. I think when you build a factory or a project or mall, you have to have an end game as to how you're going to recycle that if the companies go out of business and have to transform. And so the idea that having vast swaths of abandoned properties that are just sitting there doing nothing, this is preposterous and wasteful. And we've reached the stage where we need to rethink a lot of that as how we handle zoning. And there's been the move now to deal with more multi-occupant housing and the like, which of course a lot of people who want their little gated lawned enclaves can't stand. So anyway, oppose Jim for president. I'm certainly old enough for it. I absolutely. I'm sure that my chances of becoming president of the United States are vanishingly small. Less than Jill Stein, thank you very much, and less than RFK Jr. But anyway, there's an awful lot of. I would like to see an amendment to automatically release the tax returns of presidents, vice presidents, Speaker of the House, and Majority Leader in the Senate, and Supreme Court justices, and that this would be varying levels as to retroactively. And then in certain cases, for example, if you actually, the moment you're nominated, say, for Supreme Court, or the moment you are filing and actually become an official presidential candidate, automatic returns put out. And if you become president or become a justice, all tax returns you have from now on are automatically released and made public. Your life will be an open book from that point on. And that's one of the prices you pay for the public service. And if you've got skeletons in your closet, and holy smokes, medical records too. Yes, that's another matter that there needed to be, because we've got Trump is now concealing his tax returns and his health records. And gosh, how I would love to see Trump go under an MRI and to find out what the hell's going on in his brain, the anterior cingulate cortex, which is involved with self-delusion, and the amygdala connections, which can be related to psychopathy. There's a whole bunch of little things that I'd like to know what's going on in his little noggin. And someday down the road, presuming he doesn't become president, I do not rule out the prospect that as his health and mental state continue to decline, and it's accelerated, malignant narcissism and the like tends to get accelerated by frustration and losing the presidency and having to continue to face criminal trials, which odds are he'll lose, because that's one of the reasons why he wants to not get in court much, because he tends to lose court cases because he's a corrupt nitwit. Anyway, yes, his brain is probably Swiss cheese. That's a terrible insult for Swiss cheese. We need a lower category than Swiss cheese. We're in paramecium level here. Volvox, I think, has more collective intelligence than what Trump is doing at the moment. The weird rhetoric, his fascination with certain words like beautiful, he's obsessive about that stuff. You can see the accordion move that he goes into when he gets into trope mode. So it's like he's pumping all the stuff out. He does that retrospectively. And whether or not he's incontinent, there's various people. Adam Kinzinger says, well, the guy smells. And so apparently he's got a serious problem. And his wackaloon medical guy, the pill pusher fellow, he is a gastrointestinal person. That's relating to those kinds of illnesses. So there's just a slew of stuff that we would want to know about that, and to make it official that that's part of the price you pay for that. And of course, another thing that would have to be done by amendment is to get rid of the damned electoral college. It's outlived its usefulness. Within the last 140 years, yeah, 1880, 1980, 140 years. That the times when the electoral count has mismatched the popular vote, every one of those presidents has screwed up the economy. Harrison in 88 and Bush in 2000 and Trump in 2016. This is not a bad track record. Generally, it was the bee farmer. Well, yeah, I had ambivalent views about Carter during his administration, and some of the people I liked, Zbigniew Brzezinski, I thought was my opinion of him grew over the years, as opposed to Kissinger, that my opinion has grown progressively more dismal over the years. Others, I had a ambivalent view on. Whoops. But as an ex-president, he's absolutely exemplary. And I would never accuse him of being other than a principled person and a gentle, decent person who lives his faith and does stuff. All the things with Habitat for Humanity. I mean, this is exemplary. Even over in, little George Bush got together with Clinton, and they were doing all sorts of initiatives to get anti-AIDS medicines and things in Africa. I mean, there's some positive sides to stuff. I can't see Trump ever doing anything in that classification. And as an ex-president, he'll be just as scuzzy and annoying and irrelevant as he was as a president or before he became president. And the man does not have it in him temperamentally. It's all about him. So that would be kind of thing. Well, he had a lot of problems on his trade. He was certainly hit with the fact that the economy was still in the stagflation mode. That's another reason, as an old fart, I remember when inflation was a really serious thing, and not a little teeny bliplet where it's flirted with 8 or 9% for a couple months, and then they got it wheezed back, and it very quickly abated without a recession. Biden's and the Federal Reserve and that get props for that. Whereas, how would you like it if you had the stagflation, which, by the way, began when Nixon put in wage and price controls? He was complaining that there was 4% inflation. Listen to that number, 4% inflation. And he was panicked on it. So he put in wage and price controls and managed to turn 4% inflation into 11% inflation. And then it continued to ratchet up to Ford and Carter to 12, 13, 14. It was flirting around with 15% when it cost him the election, plus the Iran affair that didn't help either. So it sank that administration mightily. And Reagan comes in, and between Reagan and Volcker, they decided to consciously bite the bullet. One way to squeeze inflation out of the economy is the way is a recession. So they jacked up interest rates like 20%. We had a 10% unemployment rate. And even when Reagan in 84 was running for re-election, the inflation rate was higher in 84 than it is now. And so, my gosh, Reagan would love to have an economy as strong as Biden's. And yet they routinely indicate from polls that way too many people seem to think that the economy is not improving, that it's not okay, because they're looking in their tunnel vision world. And so an awful lot of people are, James Ortucan Downer, the GDR passed. The economic structure of the Biden administration managed to pull off the rebound from the pandemic as smoothly as you could possibly imagine. And we've got one of the strongest economic periods, but far too many people are so young that unless you have old enough to remember what housing interest rates were before 2008, that's a long time ago for a lot of people. Newer homeowners have only seen interest rates go up, and so housing prices are messy. Another factor occurs when you have the price of properties just shot through the roof in the Dakotas with all of their oil boom. All these people moving in, and suddenly there's gentrification, and it creates a mess. Is that going to change under any administration? Not unless you think this through and ameliorate it by other means. And then when you're as old as I am to remember that stagflation thing, would you really want to have a big recession with high interest rates? But every single industrial country that had an inflation spurt after the pandemic did that because they rebounded fairly quickly. And we rebounded really quickly. And so we had a little big bump. Of course, there are quite a few other countries that had a rebound bigger than ours, even though, interest rate bits, because they don't have as sound of economic policies as we do. The exception that proves the rule, oh yes, Trump absolutely mishandled the pandemic. 300,000 to 400,000 Americans died needlessly under Trump. And it would be interesting if the reporters, when they would be interviewing people and bringing up the pandemic, would be aware of that. But it's entirely possible that they're not terribly aware of that technical literature. But there were reports in PNAS and I think either the Lancet or the British Medical Journal, I can't remember which, did another study on that reached the same kind of conclusions. And that is absolutely unconscionable. It showed everything that was wrong with the myopia of Trump, who always likes to argue things away. I think it's interesting that the Apprentice movie has just come out. That's yes, American Durable Goods. The Apprentice movie is out, which is about Donald Trump's connection to Roy Cohn back in the 70s and 80s, and the mutation of his personality into the mess that we see from that point on. And Trump and his lawyers tried for years to make sure that it never got released, because this is actually a production that has been going on for some years. And finally, somebody that just said, oh, hell with it, I'm going to try to arrange a distribution on it independent of the regular studios. And so away we go. So finally, it's about to be aired. And those of us familiar with Trump's history are well aware of the little troll Cohn, and how he taught him to do the big lie, that you always deny everything, you never admit defeat, you just lie through your teeth on all of it, and you counterattack. If you're accused of something, you accuse your accusers of the same thing, but worse, and which is why Trump is constantly calling Kamala stupid, and he's simply projecting his own inadequacies, which I think are seething around in his head like little BBs rolling around. Only Durable could left the packaging they put around the trash. Well, there's still there's actually an awful lot of industrial growth that's occurred under the Biden administration. Trump's administration actually lost manufacturing jobs, and even that famous example of a factory that he was going to save supposedly, and it ended up closing anyway. So Trump just bullshits on this stuff, and the details. Trump's dad, Frank, is part of the reason why Trump has such a nasty personality. And he was a nasty, kind of eugenic style, authoritarian father who thinks the whole world is either killers or losers. And killers are the genetically superior smart people. And so if you are successful and wealthy, then by definition, you are a killer and a superior genetically and smart. And so that's part of the rationale of why Trump has always tried to sustain this illusion that he belongs in that category, because to be a loser is, in his dichotomous either or zero-sum game universe, you can never get around to it. But anyway, I'm thinking, as Trump's mental condition disintegrates, and if he doesn't become president, it's going to just continue to deteriorate. What's going to happen as his finances continue to flail? He's running around trying to sell $100,000 watches and trinkets all over the place, but the stock bits, the Trump media thing has not been doing spectacularly well, and a lot of the stock offerings that he offers to try to capitalize on his name, he doesn't actually do stuff. He doesn't make things. He just markets himself. But those haven't been doing terribly well. He's got big bankrollers. Elon Musk is floating around in there, but Musk has his own little sidebar problems. At any rate, if his finances reach the stage where he's looming a seventh bankruptcy, what would stop the kids, Eric and Don, and maybe some others in the family, to try to do with Donald what Donald did with his father Frank, and declare him mentally incompetent and glom onto the finances while there's still something there to inherit. We'll see. And it's going to be an interesting, because the last of Trump's big real estate debts, as far as I could see from the reportage at Washington Post, and that one's apparently going to be coming due in 2028. Most of the big debt, 890 million of his billion, came due in 2023 and 2024. So I'm assuming that the dregs end of that are hitting him. Plus, that's not including all the fun and games of the hundreds of millions in fraud fines and other pending lawsuits and maybe jail time. We'll see what happens on that front. So it's going to be funky. And the irony would be that his lawyers were so effective in delay, to think that they could run out the clock, that he's managed to push so many of these bad things to happen that they'll all be hitting at once. So he'll get frequent flyer miles going from one trial to another if he doesn't manage to be president. So isn't that an intriguing little world? Well, anyway, let me put up the patrons to remind everybody of that issue, because kids, I can't do it without your ongoing help. And the more the merrier. Pass the news around if there are other people that you know that can become a patron to the channel. It's an area that, I got my book royalties and my Social Security and my Patreons, and that's my income. Golly gosh, I wish I could have the kind of cash flow to well, not that I would ever want to have a bloody 757 jet, but the point is that, well, I could get a repair on the garage door. That's my level of thinking. At any rate, I couldn't do it without you kids. And what about 500 million of the E-Gene settlement? Yes, yeah. I've still heard nothing about Mary Trump and the lawsuit that she may or may not pounce on about the inheritance that she got cheated. And then there are potential other things. One of the things that if the administration finally changes in Florida, bless their little hearts, Trump's Mar-a-Lago lease explicitly forbids him to use it as a private residence. And yet that's exactly what he's been doing. Why the hell hasn't he had to pay back all those little tax breaks that he got for that little lease? He's always been riffing off of the kindness of strangers in getting money into things. Volume 2, we're anticipating sometime in 2025. We've got still a couple chapters. I finished the first 2 chapters, which is all on the big slosh, the flood geology, the history of it, and all the stuff about dinosaur soft tissue, all the fun stuff on Armitage and all the rest, and all the mythology and things. Some of the stuff is in extensive appendices. The Ark Encounter kind list, which was it kind of gravitated out to become kind of an appendix, and then decided to upgrade it, and it's going to be a chapter on its own. So I've got that to work on, and then the one that I'm dealing with immediately next, which is the cosmology chapter. And then there's several more chapters that Jackson still is constructing, along with the fact that he's got an actual career as a teacher there in Louisiana. So yeah, we anticipate in 2025. Theoretically, I can hope by the end of 2025, I'll also have the volume 3, the third in the Paralogs of Fog novels out, and the Jewels to the Flame, and then I will be gear shifting to work on book 4. I have the whole bloody series plotted out, so it's just a matter of writing the breathless, wonderful prose that is involved in that. So everybody doesn't have the books. Get the books. Get for your fall time reading, for Christmas gifts, for stuff that in the science. Well, in fact, the novels and that. Donate them to the libraries so that other people can see that as well. I donated copies of my books, the science material to the novels to our local library, so that's available there. Legally release a book whenever he wants. That's it. Can legally release a book. Yes. Well, yeah, through the just make sure all little copyright information and stuff is on there. It's fun. It's for everybody that liked Rocks for Their Volume 1. Volume 2 is going to be ratcheting up the material. Just when you think that the level of stupid that you can get in creationism was exhausted in the first novel, first book, no, there's still more to come. And some of the major characters, all the stuff we've got on Beckley, you ain't going to like the book. I can tell you there. And more material on Snelling and a whole slew of cast of characters because there's so many people sloshing around that flood mythology. It's absolutely fascinating. Everything from people trying to hunt living pterosaurs and God, and then the NAMI episode with the Ark Hunters. It's fascinating. So anyway, we are, okay, good 50 minutes on there. Let me put up advert for our cute little book. Get that settled up. Okay, come on. There we go. And then we need to share. We're very proud of the book, and we will be as equally proud of Volume 2. Okie doke. Well, everybody stay safe in so many areas that have gotten flooded and the mess of things, and let alone war zones. Everybody stay safe. Watch out for any rampaging wooden penguins. And we will be seeing you kids next week.